Okay, the struggle I always run into when I'm teaching something like this is that there's such a broad range of abilities and skills and know-how, and there's some people who don't know much at all, and there's some people who know a lot. And the same is true in the class that I taught at IU this past semester, that some people already knew everything I was going to tell them, and some people really struggled to grasp it. So I apologize if it's one extreme or the other for you. I'm going to start with some basic stuff. I hope did everybody get the handout? Okay, we're going to start by talking about that handout, and I actually want a copy to go over as I talk to you. And this is just some of the basics of digital photography and some of the terms and definitions you'll run into, and I just want to make sure we're kind of all in the same place on that. So the first thing that I've put on here is a thing about megapixels. I'm sure, how many of you own a digital camera, out of curiosity? Almost all of you. Okay, that's good. How many of you get your own photos off your digital camera and put them on your computer? A few less. Okay, that's good to know. The first thing we're going to look at is megapixels, and I'm sure anytime you're shopping for a digital camera, that's all you hear about is, oh, this one's got 7 megapixels, this one's got 3, and so it's kind of important to actually know how that can affect your photography. In terms of shooting for the web, which is what we're talking about today, really any digital camera is going to do the job. But if you want to shoot and you want to make print quality photographs, then you're going to need something that has a little bit more. So this is just a chart. You can probably find it on the internet just as easily as you can find it on this handout that talks about how many megapixels you need to make an image that is photo quality. So basically you can see if you're going to make an 8x10 image, the measurements on here inches, then you need to get a camera that has a megapixel rating of about 8. Okay, that's a true 8x10, and we're gonna talk about this as we go on. So question number 2 on there is, how many megapixels do I really need? Like I said, for the internet, the answer is not many. Okay, you can probably do it. I brought both my cameras that I have here today. I just have this Sony CyberShot that I've had for probably 3 years that I use to take photos of me and my friends, and maybe when I go hiking and I want to take something small. And it is 3.2 megapixels. And then I have my SLR camera, my digital SLR. This is a Nikon D50 with just a wide angle lens on it, and this is what I use to do any of the serious photography that I do for work or when I'm just out hiking around and want to take some serious photographs. Either one of these is going to get the job done. They're going to take photos for you, and you're going to get photos that you can put on the web. There's going to be a quality difference in terms of different variables you can control, but either one's going to do the job. So my goal today is to kind of tell you ways you can do these things without spending a lot of money, because I know I don't have a lot of money to spend, and so I look for ways to do things on the cheap. Going back to question number 2 there, professional quality photos are printed at 300 DPI. Okay, DPI stands for dots per inch. It's a term that's used when you're talking about a printed photo in terms of its resolution and how high quality it is. So this chart up here is based on printing at 300 DPI, which is considered to be true photo quality. Okay? Obviously, you don't have to print something that high resolution. You can print at lower resolution. And on the second page here, we're talking about resolution and just trying to get a little better grasp of what that is and what that means. So what's resolution anyway? Resolution is the amount of pixels that are in an area of a photograph. The higher the resolution, the better quality photo you're going to get. Then we've got the 2 images down there that you can look at. Basically, think of these as a square inch. They're probably close. So what DPI measures is dots per inch. Okay, it's also called pixels per inch. Don't worry about the terms, they're interchangeable. Okay, dots per inch and pixels per inch basically mean the same thing. The difference is that pixels per inch refers to an image on a computer screen, and dots per inch refers to a printed image. Okay, but they're interchangeable, so don't worry if I say one or the other. So essentially, if you look at the image on the left-hand side, that one would be considered to have a DPI of 4. Okay, there's 4, think of those as just really giant pixels. 4 really giant pixels there. Okay, the one on the right is going to be 16. Okay, and obviously the one on the right, because it has so many more pixels in it, is going to be a higher quality image. Okay, you're going to get more detail. Okay, if you have a really low resolution image with not a lot of pixels, then you're going to see those blocks start to appear. Yeah?
All right.
Let's try the microphone,
I have only a 5
or I'll repeat it.
megapixel camera.
Uh-huh.
So according to your chart, it won't even do an 8 by 10.
Technically.
Okay.
You're right. Okay, the question was, she has a 5 megapixel camera and she's wondering about doing an 8 by 10. Like I said, this chart is based on this 300 DPI, which is your optimum resolution that you're shooting for, essentially. You can still make an 8 by 10 and it'll still look pretty good. Okay, so this isn't.
If I use like high quality, you'll get to that, but you know how you can adjust your camera to high and raw.
Exactly.
So if I take it at a high quality, then I can.
Exactly. If you, right. Yep.
Max is going to be 5 megapixels.
Right.
Right.
As high as you can go.
Right.
Right. So, like I said, this chart here, don't look at this as set in stone. This is considered 300 DPI, which is, if you go to a really quality photo printing place and they have a really nice printer, that's probably what they're going to print your photos at. A lot of places you can still print at 200 DPI, 250 DPI, and thereby, by lowering the resolution, you can get a bigger image. That still looks pretty good. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. And so then below that image there, it just talks about some of the common kind of dots per inch that you see out there. High quality photo prints, like we said, are 300 DPI. Lower quality photo prints are 200 to 250 DPI. You can print those for your friends and no one will ever know the difference between 200 and 300. 300 is just really when you really want to do a super professional photo and really make it big, then that's what you need to do. A newspaper is printed at around under 133 DPI, so we're going lower. Newspapers don't look as nice. And then when we get to the computer screen or the web, it's only 72 DPI. So you can make a photo much, much larger on the web than you can in print because the dots per inch is lower. Okay, one concept that's important to remember is that once you've taken your digital image and you've captured the pixels, the way a digital camera works, as opposed to film, if I open this up, some of you are probably familiar with old film cameras. What would happen is there's the mirror there. Okay, the mirror opens. I can actually pull it up a little bit. It's not going to hurt it. And it would expose the negative, right? And the light would expose the negative, and the negative would record whatever light hit it, and that would record your image. Okay, digital cameras obviously do not have anything along those lines. Instead, what it has is it has hundreds of sensors in there, which capture the light. And then those sensors, put this back on before I break it. Those sensors then save everything that they've seen. They've saved that light as the image, okay? And most commonly, that's going to be the JPEG image. Okay, I'm sure you guys have all probably heard of a JPEG image or maybe worked with it in some sense. Okay, some cameras have the RAW ability, like you were talking about, and that is a little more advanced, and we can talk about that later. But it's not anything you have to know or have to worry about. It's something that's a little nicer for professional photographers that you can do, but you don't have to. So one thing I want to talk about first is kind of just how we can generally set up a shoot. A lot of you have physical artwork that you create, whether it's a painting, whether it's a sculpture, whether it's metal, like you were talking about, any types of things like that. And here's what I'll tell you first off, is your best bet is to shoot it outside. Talking about being inexpensive, not doing anything really fancy, shoot it outside. Okay, that way you don't have to buy any equipment, you don't have to set anything up. You can use the natural light to hopefully achieve what you want. Now obviously, that might not be ideal. You might want to get light and you might want to light your image in certain ways, and that's what we're going to talk about with the light that I brought. But if you're just trying to do, you don't have equipment, you don't have anything like that, you want to get a good shot, then your best bet is to do it outside. Okay, now natural sunlight is your friend. Okay, natural sunlight is very good. But you don't want to be directly in it. Okay, mostly the goal of a lot of the lighting that you want to do is to get what we consider diffuse light. Okay, you don't want light that's directly from the source. So let me go ahead and pull out my props that I brought as my pretend artwork. This is my dinosaur. This is going to be our pretend artwork. There it is, in all its glory. Sure, turning off that one would probably be good. And so just to talk about the concept of direct light versus diffuse light, you can see that this is just a very basic light. It's just got a little halogen light in here, straight reflector, very cheap, the simplest thing we had at the journalism school. I don't personally own this, but you can see, let me aim it on there. It's also going to get very hot very fast. Okay, we've lit up our art really well, right? It's very bright, but we also have this really heavy shadow over here. Okay, sometimes you might want that. You might want shadows on your artwork, but most of the time you're probably not going to want that. You're not going to want the heavy shadows. You're going to want either light shadows or not really any shadows at all. You're going to want it to be pretty evenly lit, hopefully from both sides. And so by shooting it outside, that's what you're going to achieve. The best times to shoot outside are during the day in the shade. Shade gives you great diffuse light. You'll get better colors. You'll get more vibrant colors by shooting in the shade. On a cloudy day, everything looks more colorful on a cloudy day because the light is more even. Or during what's called the golden hour. And the golden hour is the hour after sunrise and the hour before sunset. Those times are considered to have golden light. As the sun comes up or goes down, gets closer to the horizon, the light turns more brilliant yellow as opposed to the kind of the clear white you get during the day, and you'll get better color for your images. So here is our artwork with its heavy shadow. So to kind of illustrate the concept of, we want diffuse light. We don't want this, you could even say this is direct sunlight or a direct light that you have. What people do is we use things like this reflector. And bear with me while I put this on here.
Can you just use a regular umbrella?
Probably not. You might be able to get away with it depending on what color it is, especially if it's maybe a lighter color. And really, I should lower this a little bit too, because it's a little far away. Okay. Let's get that to stay right there. Okay, now what we've done is instead of giving it the direct light and getting that really heavy shadow, we've given it the softer light. Okay, obviously this is not the ideal situation, okay? In fact, I really should lower this a little bit more because it's still pretty dark. Like I said, I just want to talk about concepts today and not focus on the specifics. Okay, so setting up something like this wouldn't be totally inconceivable in your house. What I would do if I was really going to shoot this is obviously maybe I'd have a second light over here because it's really dark on this side. Okay, if you have something that's really heavy in contrast and you want to shoot it like that, you can do that. You could also set up another reflector over here that would also reflect that light. I've brought such a thing. This is another prop that I borrowed from the journalism school. Okay, and what that does is that also reflects the light as I drop it. Bad thing about this is someone's got to stand there and hold it, or you got to prop it up with something. But you can see the immediate difference between, maybe you can, from where you're sitting, maybe you can't. Really dark on this side, a lot more lit up on that side. Okay, so you can have one light source and you can reflect it and you can get the diffuse light that way. Okay, that's one way of getting diffuse light by using something to bounce it. And you can think of ways you can do this at home. If you have something that's really reflective, you can make that work. You actually can, I don't really recommend it, but if you're really looking for a way to do it, you can use tinfoil on a sheet of cardboard, and it will do the job. You want to get it as flat as possible so it doesn't, any wrinkle in that tinfoil would bend the light and refract it in different ways. You would really want to get it as smooth as possible. But it would do the job. It would reflect the light, and it's a cheap alternative to buying something like this. Okay? The other way that you can get diffuse light is by filtering your light source through something. Okay? And this is commonly called a light box. Luckily, this thing also has this capability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this umbrella back off of here. Hope I don't burn my hand. And instead of doing the light that way, raise it back up just a bit here. Okay, so here we are back to our really strong, harsh light on our artwork. And if you can see the difference that that makes, just filtering it through something, okay? There's that real heavy shadow. See this real heavy shadow coming across? Look how much it disappears just by putting it through something. Okay? So we've got this nice even light on the one side of the subject. I feel really funny using this T-Rex. Maybe I should have gotten a piece of pottery or something, but it's working. So we got the nice even light on the one side, and the shadow isn't as bad on the other. Again, if I had 2 of these, this would be perfect. Maybe I can make this work. But if I had something over here to reflect this filtered light, John will help me demonstrate, you can see that that, again, kind of achieves the same effect. Okay? So the key to shooting your artwork would be, I'm going to turn this off before it gets super hot. Avoid the really harsh light. Okay? So, like I said, daylight can be your friend, and just doing it outside can be great. You're going to want to find a shady spot, though, so you get that diffuse light, or do it on a cloudy day. And if you really want to, you can set stuff up inside. Does anyone have questions so far about any of this?
Could you even get, shooting, say something tiny like jewelry outside,
Could you get something like really small outside?
Yeah.
Yes, you could. It's a little harder because when you're shooting something small like jewelry, chances are you're going to be using a lens that you need to zoom in with. You're going to get like a telephoto or a zoom lens to zoom in on that jewelry and get it nice and close. And because of that, because of the nature of a telephoto lens and zooming in, you're going to need more light.
How about a macro lens?
A macro lens would also do it, in the opposite end of the spectrum.
Close-up lenses you can
Exactly, right. Macro lenses are much less common than a telephoto lens, but if you can get one, then obviously that's a really great thing to do. Yeah?
Do you have any recommendations for glare or hot spots
Recommendations for glare or hot spots?
to get rid of them?
In terms of digital editing afterwards, or?
No, in the actual photography process.
Okay, what is it that you're shooting?
Shiny pottery,
Shiny pottery.
anything shiny. You know, that's where you
Like
get.
your
Exactly
sculpture,
the
same
same.
as
Yeah,
his
yeah.
sculpture, losing your details in the white and bright.
I mean, you can't get rid of hot spots. There's always, hot spot no matter what you do with the
Right,
light.
anything that's
So-
shiny or has glaze or?
Right. So the idea is to diffuse it as much as you can and to bounce light back onto it so that it brightens up the dark area.
Right.
So it's not so evident. But there's got to be something like the way that you place the light, the angle that diffuses in relationship to either the sun or the
Right.
light.
Well, obviously, you're going to get glare when you get the direct light on it. And let's say, I'm going to turn this back on. Okay. If I'm shooting it from where you are. Okay, so we're going to say that this is our angle that we're going to shoot it at. And obviously, you're right in that you're saying the idea is to diffuse it as much as possible. That's obviously step one. So let's pretend we have our light box on here and we're doing it that way. Obviously, your positioning is going to affect it. The farther it is in front, the more that glare or that hot spot that you're talking about is going to be right in your lens. Okay. Inversely, the problem is though, if you go farther back, obviously that hot spot's going to appear. If you have a round pot, it's going to appear more here, which is on the back side of the photo, but you're also losing that light in the front. So what I would suggest doing, if you're setting this up with any kind of lights or anything like that, is trying to get the main light coming from the side like that, so you're not going to get the hot spot, and then trying to reflect it. Let's use this. This will. No, I need to grab the other one here. Sorry for walking back and forth so much.
Can I hold something for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then trying to get it to reflect back onto the front.
This?
Yeah. So trying to hide that hot spot on the back of it. You're right, though. It's unavoidable. And the more light sources you add and the more diffuse they are, then the better you're going to be. And adding one.
More light sources. So like a lot of these light kits come with like 2 lights. So you're saying that if you were to light from either side, it would help?
It would help.
I light from above, so.
Okay. Lighting from above, obviously, is good in some aspects. You don't get the shadows extending left or right. It's straight down. So you don't get the shadow. That's not going to work, unfortunately. But obviously you don't get the shadow, but where are you tending to get the hot spot when you shoot straight down? Is it on like does it have a beveled edge and that's what's catching it?
Shape of the object, but it would happen, you know, if I was shooting sculpture or you or any type of material that's reflective, it's gonna get that hot spot. You know, if your sculpture is shiny, then it's gonna absorb more of the light.
Right.
Than something that's shiny. So yeah, it's usually like some really bright spot in the middle of the pot, like you can't move it. You try to move it to a place that's the least
Right.
annoying for when you shoot the work, so you know it's not like dead center in the middle of the photo or the image, but it's still really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
Some people use what's called a dulling spray, and they spray that out
Yeah.
there. That
Okay.
Yeah, that helps.
A dulling spray, that's something that I'm not familiar with.
Hairspray on the pot.
But there's a special dulling spray that's
Yeah.
designed.
But hairspray works, and there's that you know that stuff you use for to fix matte fix or something for charcoal drawings and things like that. That works. It dulls it.
Not on, okay, not on.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that that existed because I've never shot pottery before, but a dulling spray is something that sounds very helpful. But I mean, your first instinct was right in what you said, that I'm trying to continue to diffuse it, but also adding more light sources. You know, the more light sources you add, the less strong they have to be. You know, if you have 3 light sources, they don't have to be as strong as if you just had 1 light source. And so you'll get less of a glare and less of a hot spot. That makes sense? Yeah, question?
I had a question about resolution. I know we.
Okay, no, you're fine. That's why I'm stopping.
Yeah. I had I think they were making a photo CD and they requested 600 pixels per inch. And I've had a couple of times when I was getting something printed, they requested 600. Is there really an advantage to going over 300 or not?
Some places, sure there is. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm wondering, was it just like a photo printing place that was asking for you to get 600
One of
DPI?
them was, and then another, the most recent time was a photo CD that was being produced.
Okay. Like a photo CD that was going out to people to look at? Like they were going to put the CD on their computer and then look at your photos? Yeah, I don't know why they would want 600 DPI for that,
Yeah.
for sure. But, you know, there are printers that are immaculate and can print these amazing photos. But really at this point, much over 300 DPI is a little bit overkill.
Okay.
And one thing to remember is that resolution and size are very closely tied together. So if you have an image that is, let's say, 2 inches by 4 inches at 300 DPI, it's going to be the exact same thing if it's 1 inch by 2 inch at 600 DPI. So by doubling the resolution, you're halving your size. Does that make sense? So that's important to remember, because once you've taken your image and you've created that image through your digital camera, you can't add pixels to it. Okay, you can't ever make that image bigger, because if you resize that image larger, what the computer is going to do is it's going to try to add pixels in, and you're going to lose resolution. Okay, you're going to start seeing kind of blockiness and some choppiness around some of the edges, especially. You can always resize a photo smaller, and you can never resize it bigger. Just remember that. So my suggestion to you is, as you're shooting your artwork on your cameras, go to that highest size. Shoot at that highest size, because you can always make it smaller, but you can't ever make it bigger. Yeah, question over here?
In terms of dealing with whiteout, is it better to shoot at too low a light rather than too high a light?
Shooting at too low of a light than too high of a light.
Let's go back and-
You're saying when you're getting white spots on the metal sculptures? Yeah, I would say so. And if you're using a tripod, you know, and you can really steady your camera, then you can shoot at lower light and, you know, lower shutter speeds accordingly, which can help. You know, it really depends on each individual thing, and it's a matter of experimenting with it and moving the light. And, you know, I wish we could take one of your pieces up here and, you know, play with it to see it. But yeah, you know, shooting, the lower light you shoot at, you will get less hot spots, but on the other hand, it's a trade-off in that it isn't as well lit and you have to shoot at a slower shutter speed. Yeah?
Some digital cameras have the capability of changing how it reads for lighting, like white balance.
White balance. Yep, I was going
And,
to talk about that.
And so the question you're using, and so
Yep.
what's your recommendations?
White balance is an important thing we were going to talk about. I know most of you said that you have either used a digital camera or own a digital camera. And if you own a digital camera that has very many features on it, I doubt that my little Sony one, I don't think this has a white balance feature on it. This is pretty much, you're fully automatic. You can't adjust focus. You can't adjust shutter speed or aperture or anything like that. Whereas this has a lot more options, and you can adjust things like white balance. Automatic features are nice, especially for when you, and this goes for all automatic features on a camera, when you want to be taking photos quickly, you want things to adjust to what you're doing on their own, and you don't want to worry about the settings. But as with anything automatic, if you can set it yourself, you're probably going to get better results. So most of these cameras have a white balance feature on them. And what that means is, on this one, if I go to my white balance feature, this one I think has, I'm trying to remember, I think it has 6 different white balance settings, and it'll be different for each of you in your cameras. But look it up in your camera manual if you don't know what that is, or you don't know how to get to that on your camera. This one has a direct sunlight setting. This one has a fluorescent light setting. It has an incandescent light setting, which is any kind of tungsten bulb or anything like that, which is also what I use for halogen because I don't have a halogen setting. And I think it also has a cloudy day setting, and I think it also has a kind of a dusk setting on it for white balance. And so what white balancing does, and this is important to get accurate colors in your image, so you don't have to go back in later and edit them to get the correct colors. Obviously, if you can get the right colors on the first go around without having to go in and do digital editing, then you're better off. And going back to high school physics class here, if you remember, all different kinds of light have different wavelengths. Fluorescent light is very different from tungsten light. And a lot of times when you're shooting in fluorescent light and you have a bad white balance, things are going to start looking green. You get kind of a green cast to your photos. And what that is your camera is just reading the light wrong. And so by setting the white balance manually, which I would suggest doing over the automatic feature, you're going to tell the camera to adjust to that wavelength of light to get the true colors for what they are. Questions about that? Does that make sense? Yeah?
My camera, though, it turns out takes better pictures on auto. The color balance is better, no matter
Really?
what you do with it. So I have a feeling that so the question is there an optimum kind of lighting that you can purchase that would work best with a digital camera? So that if someone's gonna shoot something indoors and use, special lighting,
Right.
what would give you the truest optimum color for your paintings or objects that you're photographing?
The question is there a certain kind of light that's best to use? I'm just repeating it for the camera. But, the answer is no. Unfortunately, there isn't one answer in terms of, you said your camera works best on automatic. That's great. Then forget about it, leave it on that. If that's what's taking the best photos for you, then great. But for most people, that probably won't be the case, unfortunately, and you'll probably need to go in and think about your white balance and figure out what it is beforehand. I'm losing my train of thought here.
Well, how do you know before you set the camera what to do?
How do you know what your white balance should be?
Yeah.
Well, if you're shooting, in here, if we didn't have this light on, because this light is a different kind of light, everything in here is fluorescent light. So if I was shooting a photo of you guys right here, and I wanted to take photos of you guys, I would set it to fluorescent light. If you know that you're in a room, or if you're using bulbs like this is an incandescent bulb, then you would set it to the incandescent setting. And usually that looks like a little picture of a light bulb when you set it to that one. Fluorescent looks like the little bar. Sunlight looks like a sun. There's one that looks like a cloud. Those are usually your options for white balancing. So just,
What about mixing them?
what's that?
What about mixing them? Like, how you said to have more than one light source? Is that crazy? It doesn't work like that?
Well, if you're going to use more than one light source, it's best if they're the same kind of light source. Like I wouldn't, if I was going to shoot this, back to our beautiful piece of artwork here, I wouldn't use an incandescent light on this side and a fluorescent light on this side.
So you turn those off.
Right. If I was really going to shoot this, I would want to get rid of all this fluorescent light and just have the one kind of light so that the white balance that I'm using is going to give me the true colors. And answer to your question though is, what kind of light is going to give you the best colors? The answer is the sun, because the sun is the purest
Well,
light.
you can't do that. I mean, like, if you
Right.
had a choice between like a halogen or a photo flood, if you were getting professional photography equipment, what would be a good, choice?
It's a bit of a matter of personal opinion. I personally would probably choose halogen lights and use halogen lights and set my camera to white balance according to that. The best thing to do is to experiment with your own camera, with your own artwork, and see what works best. And I know that's hard because it's hard to get access to some of this equipment.
Aren't those expensive, the halogen kits? You can get Smith Victor little light bulb, 250 watt,
They are.
2 light kit for $50 or $60.
Yeah, there's some great, if you get on the internet and you just Google like, beginning light kit or something like that. I know in particular there's one set that actually comes with 3 lights and little kind of mini tripods and basically light boxes for those. And remember, a light box is basically the white filter that I talked about passing the light through. And you can get that for, I know, less than $200. And that's 3 lights with light boxes and everything. So there are kits out there. Obviously halogen is expensive, but in terms of the quality of light, I would prefer that. But then again, I'm poor and I would never be able to afford that. So I've even set stuff up at home before, honestly, with lamps and lampshades and sheets. It doesn't give you the best result, but it does kind of do the job. Yeah.
Are you always going to get some whiteout if you're photographing metallics?
Probably. You're going to get a little bit in there from the light. He brought some with him too, which will be good to look at.
Here's a piece here that's about a yard high, and here's some details from like the base that she did in this, but she goes over with metallic paint, and then when I can't get it, we just sort of look at each other like
Right.
we get these whiteouts. I noticed M.L. Snowden, who does sculpture too on a really, really big level, her stuff with the metal has whiteouts on it. When it's
Now,
not
can
good.
he adjust the histogram on that?
You can.
Which is gonna bring the, yeah.
Yep.
Are you gonna get into that, or?
We can. Yeah.
That's, I think the problem is having.
Basically what he's saying is that when you're getting some problems like that, there are some post-production things you can do in terms of, you've taken your photo, you've done your best job you can with the photo, you've agonized over the lights, you've set it up, you've agonized over taking your photo, and you've done everything you can. Maybe there's still a little bit left. He's talking about going in post-production to your image and affecting it that way. Did you have something?
I've printed before on a printing press, and metallic inks, first off, they don't photograph well at all because you will get the hot spots because they diffuse that light. Instead of it being a solid color, it diffuses it completely to where it just scatters the light and it creates a hot spot because there's nothing there but the light. And then whenever you print it, unfortunately, it does the same thing.
Right.
The printer's just great whenever that happens. So, yeah, like you said, just use a lower light as far as not as intense.
And then post-production, do the.
Right. If you're still getting that result, there are some things you can do in even, pretty much the most basic photo editing programs. You can go in and do some of this stuff we're talking about. And we can look at some of that too. But I kind of wanted to wrap up the shooting section. So sorry, I'm kind of running through this stuff because I feel like I just want to cover some of the basics and not get into these real specific shot situations. Yeah?
Well, for mine, since I photograph a lot of flat 2D work,
2D work, yeah.
I found that like whenever I have two from the side at 45s and then kind of point them up,
Yep.
that helps.
You're right. I totally neglected to talk about 2D work, and we're just talking about 3D. But that, multiple light sources is always a good thing, and especially like you're saying, if you have them, if you have a 2D piece of work and you bring them in like this, and you're also saying bring them up a little bit, then that'll help them to look really good and sharp. And do you just filter the light through something, or do you just use the direct light?
And I also don't put like any kind of sealer on it until after I shoot it.
So it doesn't get the gloss.
Yep.
Right. So you just, similar to our light box, you take your light, you pass it through some kind of filter to diffuse it, and
I just
shoot your
usually
product
use
that way.
foam core.
Foam core, yep,
Point
that
it
works.
with the foam core.
Yep,
That's best.
great. Okay. What we can do now, let me look at my handout that I gave you here to see what else I'm telling you that I might be forgetting to talk about. So basically, step 1, plan your shoot. We talked about consider your lighting, white balance. Natural light is great. It's your friend if you can use it, if you can do it outside. obviously, things you're going to be doing a lot of the time don't lend themselves to being shot outside, and you're going to have to do it inside. One thing I mentioned in here was just aperture and depth of field. A lot of times if people want a more dramatic look to their artwork and they want the background to fade away, out of focus, then you're going to want to use a wide open aperture, which just means your depth of field. Some of you might know what this is already, some of you might not. Your depth of field is when you shoot a photograph, it's how much from the point A in the front where it begins to be in focus to the point B and back where it begins to be in focus. Okay? You can have that be really broad, so everything in your photo is in focus, or you can have it be really narrow, so just a little bit of your photo is in focus. So if you want that dramatic effect where part of your shot is in focus and part of it fades off and is out of focus, then use a wide open aperture, which is also called your f-stop on your camera. And if you have questions about that, feel free to ask me. Yeah?
What if we have a digital camera that doesn't have stuff?
Yeah.
Which is an automatic, can we?
That's it. You take what it gives you, because there's no way to control it,
Is there something we could focus on to maybe get that depth of field, something either slightly past or slightly in front of it to maybe?
Well, if you're shooting something 2D, I wouldn't recommend that, because then obviously there's only one plane that you want to be in focus. Yeah. I don't have too much experience. This thing, every photo I take with this, it seems like almost everything in the photo is in focus. It almost has no depth of field. It just assumes that you want everything to be in focus, and it just tries to do that. Yeah. So it's kind of unavoidable. It's kind of what you have to deal with. So, other questions? We'll start talking about moving your photos from your camera to your computer.
Yeah, I just had one more question
Uh-huh.
about depth of field. Is that for digital, I just shot manually, and the optimum f-stop was like between an 8 and 11 for a 3D object,
Mhm.
so that it didn't flatten out, so it had the most round, the most volumetric appearance to it. And so, what's the ideal sort of measurements for a digital camera?
Aperture really hasn't changed with digital cameras. You're still basically getting the same photo at the same aperture that you would with a regular camera. What has changed is that, I think this is true of all digital SLR cameras like this one, where you have lenses that you can change and remove, is that whatever millimeter rating you're at, for example, this is at 19, so this is a wide angle lens. When it's digital, however, the multiplication factor of that is 1.5. So whatever you're shooting at, if I'm shooting at 35, let me pick a number that's easy to multiply. If I'm shooting at 20 millimeters, really what the digital camera is recording is at 30 millimeter, which means it's a little more zoomed in than it would be with a regular SLR camera. That's the one thing that kind of changes. F-stop, people say 8 or 11 because that's kind of right in the middle, a little towards the open side, to have a little shallower depth of field. That really hasn't changed with digital photography. That's still the same.
But do the numbers read different
Nope.
on the camera?
Nope. This camera, I basically had this exact same camera that was a film camera, and I used the same lens on this camera that I did with my film camera. So in terms of a lens, nothing has changed at all.
If you have a digital SLR, is there a different type of numbering, or?
As just a regular film SLR,
No, if you have a digital camera, but it's on you can't change the lenses on it, it's not a SLR capability.
right? If you just have a point and shoot, kind of like this one, or I'm sure there's ones that are out there that are much more advanced than that, then you kind of lose the option of setting your aperture. There's really no way to do it. Maybe with some of the newer ones, I see commercials all the time with gimmicks about how the camera identifies 7 people's faces and manages to keep them all in focus and sharp and everything like that. But to my knowledge, there is not a point and shoot camera that allows you to control aperture and depth of field the way an SLR would. Okay, questions? Okay, let's talk about moving your photos from your camera to your computer. And there are 2 basic ways that you can do that. You can either get this USB cord. Okay, again, this is probably elementary to some of you might not be familiar with this. You can get the cord and hook your camera straight to your computer, okay? Or you can buy a card reader, which will read the card that your photos are stored on, okay? On that third page, I briefly talked about the 4 different kinds of cards that are used. Okay, they're compact flash, memory stick, secure digital, and XD. Okay, this type of card reader that I have right here, not very expensive. I would guess, I didn't buy this, again, this is the journalism schools, but probably 20 bucks. You can get this to read your cards. The card in this camera is the SD variety. Pretty small, but it is 1 gigabyte, which means it can hold a lot of photos on it, which is really nice. The technology with this is getting better and better all the time. You're being able to fit more and more on smaller and smaller cards. So, let me snap a quick photo of this real quick. We're not going to pretend that it's anything lovely, but I definitely don't want to flash. It's not even going to work unless I use this. You just want to hold that between the light and the dinosaur. And we'll snap a real quick photo. And it's still burning out on me. Okay, really I need to move this light source way farther back. But in the interest of time, since it's already 6:10, I'm not going to worry about getting a quality photo for you guys, and I just want to kind of get it imported. I actually brought a second handout with me that is all about corrections that you can do in Photoshop and some other programs like that. I didn't know how much exactly we were going to get to, so I did not give it out yet, but we can talk a little bit more about that.
While you're doing that, do you think any particular way to load onto the computer is better than the other? None of it affects the quality of the
None of it affects the quality.
Right.
As you can see, the photos I just took there are not anything particularly great. I'm using a program here called Aperture that's given out by Apple. It's their photo editing and organization program. Chances are, when you bought your digital camera, it probably came with some type of application that you can put on your computer that will do most of the same things. Okay, it might not look exactly the same, it might not be exactly the same, but basically, you know, as soon as I either put my card in or I attach my camera to my computer, it's giving me this option to import these photos. So I'm going to go ahead and import them. While we're waiting for that, you can see some good examples of art photography here with nice diffuse light. You know, here's some pottery. This is clear pottery, it's glass pottery, so the light comes through it, which is even nicer, and you get these nice shadows at the bottom. But you can see here's an example of a good shot where you have a nice white background. It's probably a white sheet back there on a white table. Light source is behind it, so the light is shining through it, coming through to the front. This next one is an example, not so good. Okay, obviously the color got way off on it. It's very skewed to be red. I wanted to put examples of good and bad in here. Okay, there's one that's a little better again. The light's coming through it. Nice, soft, diffuse light. There's no really harsh shadows or really harsh light coming through there. While we're looking at this photo, this is probably a good example of bad white balance. That's why everything has this red, it's called the color cast to it. When you have one color that's kind of overriding the rest of the colors in the photo, it's called a color cast. So what I could do is if I went in and I adjusted this, I could probably take some red out of it, and that would probably fix some of the problem at least. As you can see, as I drop that down a little bit there, it's kind of returning to its white state, which it really should look like. So incorrect white balancing can lead to color casts. Questions on that? Okay. Let's just work with one of these photos since we've got it here already. So, thinking about time and how much we have to do here. in terms of basic corrections, okay, you're going to get your photos onto your computer. You're going to have them with some type of photo organization or editing software. Do any of you have Macs, or are you all pretty much on PC? PC, Windows? Okay, a lot of the ones that you guys will have, maybe you have the Nikon program. If you have software that comes with one of your cameras, you'll get a Nikon program. Gosh, there's a million. There's too many to name. But they can all perform the same basic functions. Okay, most of them you should be able to adjust your colors on. Okay, you should be able to go in and look at your red, green, and blue values and either increase them or decrease them. Okay, that's one thing you can do that will help. That's called color balancing. Okay, and color balancing is what will take care of color casts. Remember, color cast is when a photo gets an overpowering color throughout all of it. Another thing you can do, which we brought up before, is look at the histogram. And I'm going to jump over to Photoshop for this, because this is a good example. If you have an SLR camera like this, usually you can also look at the histogram right on the window as you're viewing it. And let's switch over to a different photo that has a better looking histogram. Okay, this will suffice. Okay, so here's a photo that has a really bad color cast on it, doesn't it? It really looks red. Clearly everything in that photo, I mean, it's standing on a leaf. You know the leaf at least should look a little bit green. So here's a photo that has really screwed up color. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to color balance it. And when you go to color balance, usually you'll see something like this that has color values that you can increase or decrease. A lot of times there'll be an automatic filter that will do a really good job. I'm going to go ahead and do the auto filter on this one because I know already, because I've used this in class before, that it takes care of it really well. So I'm going to go and just go to auto color. Okay, obviously your program might not be exactly the same as this, but you should have something similar, and I wish I could speak to each individual program that you might have. Unfortunately I don't. So auto color, I mean, that made a huge difference. That entire red tint is gone. Make this full screen. Okay, so there's the huge difference that we're making. We're removing that red cast, and already we're a little closer to its true color. Now, the other thing that we're going to look at is called the histogram. And what a histogram is it's a graph of all the values, light to dark, in your photo. So if you look at that little chart up there that looks like some really steep mountain peaks, that's what's called the histogram. On the left-hand side is your dark values. On your right-hand side are your light values, and in the middle are your 50% values is what they're called, or your grays. Even when it's a color photo, you might call that your grays. So a good histogram takes up the full range of light to dark. So if you notice on this photo, it stops short of the dark and it stops short of the light. Really, in any photo you take, there should be a full range of really dark to really light values. So what you can do, again, this is a little more advanced. This might not be something you're into, and a lot of times you can automatically do something like this. But for those of you that are interested, what you can do is you can basically shrink it. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this right marker and I'm saying, okay, I want the graph to end here. Here's where the values end. That's where I want my graph to end. I'm going to do the same thing with the black. So if you look at the frog in the background, here it is without, before I made the changes to the histogram, the levels. Okay, you can see there's not really any strong blacks and there's not really any really light values, any whites. So by taking that histogram, now all of a sudden it's got a lot more jump to it, got a lot more vibrant, because now we have truly dark colors and truly light colors. So by moving the ends of that graph in, we've made the darks in the photo darker and the lights in the photo lighter. Okay, so this is a huge difference from what we had a minute ago. Just with 2 steps, we've gone from this to this. Okay? Now, talk about hotspots. That frog has got a hotspot on it, big time. That frog is way too glossy. He needs some non-glossy spray. One thing you can do in a lot of photo programs that goes back to the old days of regular digital photography and enlargers is dodging and burning. Has anybody ever heard of dodging and burning? Okay. Same concept still exists. They've taken that concept and they've transferred it and they've digitized it. And what you can do is a lot of photo editing programs have that tool. Right here is the dodge tool and the burn tool. So basically, if I take this burn tool and I burn it in, this is something you might want to investigate for your hotspots in your metal. Okay, if it's too far gone, if it's pure white, there's nothing you can do. But if it's just a little bit of a hotspot, then you can bring it down in value by burning it. So burning was a term that was used for, you would put your photo paper on the enlarger and you would expose your photo for, say, 10 seconds at whatever you had set. Okay, if you had areas of your photo that were still underexposed, what you would do is you'd cover everything else up on the photo except the spot that you wanted to burn in. You wanted to give it more light so it became darker. So that's the concept behind burning. When we're burning, the area that we're highlighting and that we're drawing over is going to get darker. Okay, dodging is the opposite. Dodging is when you've exposed your photo and maybe there's one area on the photo that's really overexposed. And so when you expose it again, you're going to block that area from getting that much light. Okay, so it's a concept that's transferring digitally and it's become a really nice tool. And you can see as I kind of paint over him, he's kind of losing his color, but that's because it's getting lighter. Okay, if I kept going and kept going and kept going, it's going to look really poor. But I'm doing that for the sake of kind of showing you. So that's the concept of dodging and burning. There's usually also another filter tool that you can use called saturation. Saturation is basically how heavy your colors are. Something that is completely desaturated is black and white. So if you go in here and your colors are too vibrant, I'm going to put this poor frog back to looking normal. And maybe I think that I've done a little bit too much to this photo, and now that red is just kind of glowing unnaturally. What I can do is I can desaturate it, which means it's just going to be less, basically vibrant. The vibrancy would be the word that you're doing. If you're making it more saturated, it's going to be even more and more colorful. A lot of you might have this, on older TVs. I think saturation was one of the main knobs that you could control. Turn it all the way down, it was black and white. Turn it all the way up, it looked like the super colorized Wizard of Oz, So that's another thing you can control. What other problems do you guys run into that you feel like you need to, I kind of want to ask, that you need to do in post-production maybe? Yeah.
I can edit on the computer and get it the way I want, but then when I print it, it comes out much darker.
Okay. That's a problem probably between your computer and your printer talking. Either, it could be a number of things. Your computer monitor could be calibrated incorrectly, so that what you're seeing on the screen is actually not what's going to come out of the printer. So one thing you can do is you can try to color calibrate your monitor to get these true colors that will match your printer. Could be that your printer just doesn't print the same way as your computer. So it's a learning curve in that as you work on your computer and you learn what it's going to do on the printer, you say, okay, I know it looks like this, but it prints dark, so let's take it another 10% beyond what I think looks good to where I think it starts to look almost too light. And that way when it prints, it's going to be a little bit darker. So that's different. That's definitely a learning curve thing as you work with a new printer or a different printer and you really want to get these quality prints. But the other thing could be that your monitor could be calibrated incorrectly. And that's something you can look up in terms of how to fix it. It's kind of an interesting process. But if you do an internet search on it, you might find some answers. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I didn't have my hand up, but you read my mind. How about sharpening?
Sharpening. Sharpening is a good one. Sharpening and unsharpening a photo are something that you might want to do. Maybe you've taken the photo and you've got it just a little out of focus and you feel like you can cheat a little bit by sharpening it and maybe make it look a little more in focus. That happens from time to time. I can show you where it is specifically in Photoshop, but I don't know if that's really going to help you. But Photoshop has filters that will both sharpen your photo and unsharpen it. Sometimes, what's that?
That'd be good.
Um,
I have Photoshop.
you do?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me
I
make,
don't know how to use all of it.
okay, yeah, and if any of you have specific questions, I'm trying to speak broadly here to everybody, just to kind of, to show everyone the basics, but if you have specific questions, please feel free to come talk to me. So Photoshop, you have a bunch of options under the sharpen menu. You can sharpen edges, you can sharpen more, you can smart sharpen, and you can do an unsharp mask. Unsharp mask is misleading because it sounds like you're making it fuzzy, but you're really still making it sharp.
Is Smart Sharpen like an automatic thing?
It is. Smart Sharpen is another one of those kind of auto features where it's going to take it, it's going to zoom it in, you're going to be able to look at it and say, set some settings on it, say, take this to the extreme. There it is, totally sharpened, too much, obviously. There it is, not at all. So maybe you want to go a little bit and you start to see some of that detail come back out in there. So sharpening and unsharpening is another thing you can do. What other problems do you guys feel like you run into that you might need to change after you've taken the photo?
My first one was cropping. The first thing I noticed I would do wrong was, take a picture and have an edge I didn't want, so learning to crop.
Learning to crop.
I think that was like my first.
Cropping is certainly a tool that is on any piece of photo editing software that you might come across. Also, image sizing. Do we need to talk about image sizing a little bit? How to get the image to the size that someone might ask? Okay, let's do that, but let's take this question real quick first.
And it sort of applies to everything that you're doing in Photoshop, that Photoshop works in layers, so when you do all of these different operations from, dodge, burn, sharpen, and everything else, should you be doing them in different layers, or at what point do you not go back to what you've done and check things in?
A good rule of thumb to practice with when you're going to make any kind of correction to your photos is make a copy of it first. Not necessarily in layers. You can do it in layers and you can do it that way. But if you just make a physical copy of that file, you have the file that exists. It's going to be dsc0013.jpg. Make a copy of that first so you can always go back to the original. So if you screw up, which you'll do all the time, and I do all the time, you can always go back to the original and say, oh, thank goodness I still have the original photo. And I can go back to it and I can change it and I can make it look right.
But let's say you did something to it 3 steps down the road, and what you did somewhere in between there got affected by it, and you want to change that in between step. So can you do these operations that you're talking about in a layer or not necessarily?
It sounds like what you're talking about, if you're using Photoshop, would be something that you'd want to use the history tool for. And what the history tool is, if you just hit undo in Photoshop, it'll only do one action. And then if you hit it again, it'll redo it and undo it and redo it. So you're not really moving backwards in time. Photoshop has what's called a history palette, which shows you, if I expand this, here's everything I've done since I opened the photo. At the top, you'll see it says open. Then I did auto color, then I did levels, then I did some burning, then I did some dodging, then I did some sponge tool, and then I sharpened it. So if I say, okay, I need to go back, I've messed up. I messed up after I did the burning. Okay, the dodging is bad. If I want to go back to where I was before in the history palette, you can just pick that step and you can bypass everything that you've done. You can go back to that point in time and then work on it again from there. Is that what you were kind of looking for?
Right, and it won't affect anything that you've done after that.
Right. Anything that, well,
I mean,
sort of.
It'll affect it, but it
You'll have to redo it, basically, because basically what this is,
You've undone it.
you've gone back in time.
To a point in memory.
Right. And so now anything that you've done after that, you'll have to do it again. But whatever it was you messed up on, you now have the opportunity to do right.
then you gotta redo the other things you did after that.
Right.
That's what I thought. I thought maybe there was
But
something
even
I
with
did it.
Right. There are, we can talk about layer masks and things like that. Layer masks are ways that you can apply a specific effect to a photo. And then if you don't like that effect, you can just turn it off. And it doesn't affect the other things that you've done to it. That's, again, a little more advanced, and we can talk about that if you want. Yeah, question again?
Is another way to go back to go to edit and then step forward and step backward? Is that the same
That is.
thing?
That's the same thing as the history
So
palette.
You can keep putting step backward and go back in time.
You can.
And then,
Basically what the history palette is it's a graphical representation of that where you can actually see the timeline of what you've done.
all right, okay, great, thanks.
Yep. Other questions? Otherwise, we should talk about, we're running out of time, aren't we?
If you would talk just a little bit about resizing files.
Okay, resizing. And again, oh, we are running out of time. Okay, resizing files. As I said, make sure you always make it smaller, never make it bigger. So if I have this image and I want to go to image size, let's say someone has requested a photo for you that they're going to put on their website. What resolution are we going to use, first of all? 72. So right now, this one's at 120, so we know we can go down to 72. Now, if you look up here at the file size, it says pixel dimensions. Here's the file size. It says it was 696K. By dropping the resolution down to 72 from 120, it's now 251K. So we know that we've made it smaller. Let's say they've asked for it to be 7 inches wide at 72 DPI. I don't know why. That would be kind of an odd amount. Actually, if they're asking for the web, they'd probably be asking in pixels. So let's say they want it to be 500 pixels. So I've set it to be 500 pixels at 72 DPI. That works because the thing to watch out for is just to make sure that your file size gets smaller and never bigger. For example, if I tried to make this, let's see. Let me go back into image size here. If I try to make this 1200, look what happens. All of a sudden, the file size that it's going to become has become 2.72 megabytes. But we only started with 700, about 700. So you can't make something from nothing. Okay, you can't add size to it. You always have to go down in size. So, someone has asked for this 500 pixel wide, 72 DPI. Except I typed 300. Let's make that 5. 500 by 72. We can resize it. Now we're good to go. Now, what you want to do, since you've made it smaller, okay, don't just save over what you had originally because you're losing quality. You always want to keep your biggest file intact, okay, in case you need a bigger copy later sometime. So what you want to do is you want to do a save as, okay, save a different copy of it, save it somewhere where it says, if I had named this frog.tiff, let's say we use the TIFF format, and I want to save it now to email to someone and go use on the web, I'm going to call it frogweb.jpg, so it's different. Okay? Don't save over your original because then you're losing that quality and you can't get it back. Okay? And then do you guys all know, from there you can attach it in an email, send it off to someone, etc. Okay, does anyone have general questions? Yeah.
When you went into image, there's also something in Photoshop where you can check or uncheck resample and constraint proportions.
Yep.
And was that when you said that when you alter it, you lose a little bit of information every time you go and change it?
If you make it small, assuming you're making it smaller and then saving it.
Right. But do you lose anything when you proportionately change it?
Well, if I uncheck resample, this goes back to the concept that a 2x4 image at 300 DPI is the same exact thing as a 1x2 image at 600 DPI. Twice the DPI, half the size. So right now, watch what happens if we're at about 7 inches. If I go to about 14 inches wide here, it's going to drop to about 36 pixels. See how it does that? Basically, what that does is that says you're not going to actually change the overall size of the file. You're just going to either up the size and lower the resolution or raise the resolution and lower the size. Okay. Sorry if that was scattered. I know there's so many different needs coming here. I will definitely stick around, and if you have questions, you want me to show you something on Photoshop, I would be more than happy to do that. My card is over here. You can ask me questions if you want. I do this stuff all the time. I have a freelance business where I have done websites and graphic design and stuff. Thank you for listening and bearing with me through trying to cram a lot into a short amount of time.